Hello, Jill, and welcome to the show. I'm delighted to get you here.
Hello, I'm glad to be here.
That's awesome. And you're also the first person to get the new microphone experience. So
Yes.
you're
Oh, yeah. This is
you're
awesome.
in you're
I
in a
love
very
being
privileged
here.
position. Very privileged position. I ask like all my guests when they come on the pod to introduce themselves because I joke that I always botch and undersell people when they come on the show, and I'm like, okay, but actually, in actual fact, I like to hear people describe themselves and their journey about who they are, what they do, and most importantly, how you got to where you are today. So, I guess without further ado, do you want to tell us all a bit about that, Jill?
Sure, absolutely. Well, right now, I'm currently the corporate partnership director at CORE. It's a national nonprofit called Children of Restaurant Employees. We help the anyone who works in the restaurant or the bar industry as a service employee. We help them during a time of crisis. So it's a great mission. And there was a hole. We're 20 years in now, so there was a hole 20 years ago, and we spent the past 20 years helping the people in that industry. So that's where I'm at now. But I've had a lot of different jobs throughout my years, and each one has really shaped me to where I am today. I mean, looking, a lot of where I've worked is in the nonprofit, whether it be a chamber of commerce. Um, uh, I worked at a Sea Star base that helped underprivileged people learn how to sail and to fish and do all these outdoor things to core now. But also, I had roles where doing events. Doing I was a sales manager at Macy's where I went through their sales programs. All these things really just kind of shaped who I am. And I'll tell you what, working for a nonprofit, especially ones that are smaller, everyone on that team needs to be nimble. You're running on tight budgets because you want to give much back to the mission. So you've got to wear all these different hats. You might be schlepping, you might be selling, I mean, you kind of got to do it all and be okay with it. Um, because so that's who I am. I'm a big team player. I think I'm a true believer in, obviously, more people together working together can do so much more than one person alone. And so I think when I took on this role where I am now, it really encompasses everything I've done throughout the years, wearing all those different hats, to now be working here at CORE, working nationally to help people in the food and beverage industry.
That's awesome. And I mean, you're such a wild, varied kind of experienced background. I mean, you're
Uh-huh.
quite a phenomenal operator. And I mean, the mission of Core is also like really, really impressive. I guess you want to tell us a bit about Core itself and like what your role is over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as the corporate partnership director, I am the sort of the fundraising donation arm of CORE. I work with looking for new partners where it would be a good fit, to keeping the relationship going with our current partners, but also really big on going out and speaking on behalf of CORE, whether it be restaurant associations, our partners, or at conferences, and things like that. Really, just talking about core and who we benefit. Just to kind of give a little bit better idea. As I said, core helps people in the restaurant and the food and beverage industry, service workers during a time of crisis. So it could be a natural disaster like back in Maui in the fall. We really
Oh,
came
yeah.
in and helped them. There could be a medical crisis, domestic violence, a death in the family, things that it's not the flu, it's just things that you almost can't predict. So, what we found is when someone in this industry is not working, they're obviously not getting paid. So, each day that goes by, they're getting more and more in that hole. That stress is coming on. I hopeless that they can't get out of this situation. So that's when core kind of comes in, and we help them financially during that time to build that gap, because we've had research that shows a lot of employees will go back with a cast on their leg or earlier than they should because they're so panicked about being able to pay their
Yeah.
mortgage, put food on the table. And I'll tell you what, 20 years ago, when CORE was founded, they partnered with Make-A-Wish Foundation, actually. And they, after a little while, they heard from the families, and they said, this is incredible. The memories that we have with our child, the child's memories with this. But what we really struggle with is the financial aspect during this time. We're just
Yeah.
bombarded with medical. So that's when CORE said, hey, we get it. We know our niche. And we keep the child aspect in CORE's mission, because we always like to sit there and think about it. If you don't have a child and you have a health crisis or whatever, you can couch surf, you can eat some crackers and peanut butter, and you can muddle it around. But when you've got a child or multiple children involved, it changes the game. And so that's why the child aspect is really important to us, because we feel like that's where there's a much more of a need when someone has children involved.
And I guess, building on that, we just at the back end of COVID now. And when I say the back end of COVID, I mean like
Yeah.
this never ending thing. And but I guess we're not locking ourselves down anymore, And
Exactly.
I think like the mission of core, I mean, it must have expanded greatly during that period. And I suppose the remit, so to speak, has kind of enormously kind of expanded, would you say?
Yeah, when during core, well, I mean, not during core, during COVID, oh my gosh, the community, the restaurant industry community, and all the suppliers really, I mean, unbelievable support for core. Um, and we helped, I mean, everybody. If you had COVID, we were helping you. And obviously that ended up kind of shifting a little bit. And I'll tell you though, um, the 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 partnerships, they're still coming, but it got to a point though that when COVID was sort of kind of over and everyone was trying to kind of get themselves back, people did pull back from fundraising a little bit, and we felt that. But we're now every year, it's as
Yeah.
everyone, their core business is kind of healed and it's getting better. We're feeling that again now too. We're on the upswing.
That's awesome. And I mean, that's definitely the vibe that I get, from, I guess, doing 100 episodes of this podcast. Honestly, I can't believe it's been so many. But it's definitely like, I feel like the kind of momentum shift is back into hospitality again.
Uh-huh.
And it's really a question of like motivating consumers to come back into the restaurant is like the big thing now. I think like
Yep.
inside the four walls and that experience, be it a QSR or fine dining, be it a casino or a tavern, it's like, how do we get people back into the buildings again at the same volume that they were before? But there's no question and no doubt that we're just seeing enormous investment and an enormous amount of like innovative concepts really kind of starting to take off, expansion plans for so many brands. And it's almost like a kind of, a fresh new era, a fresh start. Like,
Yep.
you know, and it's a question I'd have for you, just your kind of take on leadership anyway, is that like, we went through COVID as an industry. I mean, everybody went through COVID. So like, I want to stress that first and foremost. This point is
Yeah.
kind of for everyone, but like in particular from a hospitality perspective, the sort of relationship between staff and ownership before COVID was less tight, was very transactional. And now we're seeing an enormous investment by the largest brands in hospitality to like the smallest brands in hospitality, understanding that labor is a core part of like running that business and the costs associated with acquiring, i.e., like finding talent, the costs of keeping them, the retention side of things, like, and how you treat them. Frontline workers, basically, people who
Mm-hmm.
are, you know, we were all at home ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash and never leaving our home. There was somebody somewhere in a kitchen somewhere making food, like, and like that relationship has changed. And that tells me that leadership has evolved in the industry. And I'm curious your view on how leadership has evolved in like hospitality over the last few years, because there seems to be a much better relationship. Not to say that it was bad before, but it's certainly evolved
No,
to like new levels.
it's true. And I mean, the whole thing about retention is huge. And where are you going to choose here or here where you're going to work? And a lot of our partners and a lot of the businesses, and in some sense, they do like to work at the nonprofit, like specifically like core, because a lot of them use core as their onboarding process, because it gives the new employee a sense that they care about them and they care about the industry. And it kind of builds internal uh gosh, the word just threw me, just internal togetherness, that they're working together.
Yeah.
They might go out of work and do something for the nonprofit together as a team building, um uh you know as team building. So building that retention, and really showing that you care about the employees is huge. And if what they're found is, you walk into restaurants before, and it looked like there was nobody there, but yet they can only serve a portion of the restaurant because they don't have enough people working there. And so
Yeah.
they have to now start thinking about, how do we attract our and it's all about the culture too, the culture of the restaurant and the management that they're bringing to these employees to make them want to stay and to make them really appreciate where they're working.
Totally. I mean, this is an enormous trend. I mean, it's all very positive and obvious. You know what I mean? Like, we need to
Yeah, it
foster a
is
great
obvious.
culture. We need to
Yep.
foster great, but like I always say on this pod, it's like the devil's in the detail,
Mhm.
and you know, corporate America has been. You said schlepping other earlier, so I'm gonna use the word.
Oh yeah,
Corporate America has been, yeah, corporate America has been shilling like leadership for a long time. Like leadership
yeah,
programs, like your McKinseys and your KPMGs. I mean, that's literally kind of part of what they sell to large corporations. Is like,
yeah.
how do we prepare people, like leadership programs, training, all this kind of stuff. And I feel like I've heard from so many people on this pod that not necessarily like using McKinsey or KPMG,
Yeah.
shout outs to them, but more like that concept of how do we identify talent in the organization, because we don't want to lose them, because we don't want to try and find more diamonds in the rough. And how do we groom them appropriately and put the right programs in place
Mhm.
for leadership and for management positions? And I feel like that is definitely become an enormous priority for
Training.
anyone that's more than 5 restaurants. Like that seems to be like, okay, their people strategies. How do we keep them and how do we train them? How do we
Mhm.
tell people? This is a question for you, Jill. How do we get the message out that people can have a career in restaurants again, a career in hospitality?
Yeah, you know what? I am hearing that a lot because I was talking to some the other day, and it's like, thank thank you for your service. Like when you go to really fancy hotel like the Ritz, they'll go, "Oh, it's my pleasure," and people
Yep.
thank you. We want you're absolutely right. We need to make that industry like where we're looking at our servers and saying thank you for your service today. Making it be that next level of than what it everyone that thinks it appears to be right now. And I think it takes step by step, a little bit at a time. But you know um I when I go to conferences and I see the team from Whataburger there,
Yep.
they've got all their team, and they talk about, it's an amazing route that you can take at a place, a Whataburger or Waffle House. I mean, you become a manager, and they love hiring in. They want to groom you to go up. And so places like that, gosh, it really does. It needs to be talked about more. And maybe there needs to be like, I mean, social media seems it's sort of like with back in the day, you'd send snail mail to, promote your event or to get out what you're doing. But who does snail mail anymore? Nobody
Yeah.
reads it. And a lot of times people are at their home and you send it to the corporate office, they're not going to get it anyway. So
Yep.
and so this changing the how it's viewed to make to have the restaurants and bars to where, well, first of all, they have to be like the Whataburgers and and the Waffle Houses, where they have that 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 tier that you can keep climbing the ladder. So if they don't have it, they might start thinking about that way if they
Yeah.
want to hold on to their employees. And a lot of times people might be looking for certain skills, and I think people they need to put a lot more into, is someone easy to work with and they're trainable, and they've got a positive learning attitude, than seeing what's on paper, because some of those are your absolute best employees just by their attitude and being easy to work with. I'd rather work with someone that way than to have someone who's very difficult to work with, but who has a laundry list of qualifications in this
Yeah.
role.
Well, I think that's exactly it. We talk a lot on this podcast about talent identification. And, what do you think makes a great person in hospitality?
Oh, you're asking me?
I am. Yeah. What do you think makes a great person in a restaurant?
Oh my gosh. Under just I think just a pure understanding of customer service and a positive attitude and the willing to learn.
You know what's interesting about that answer? And you'll laugh when I say this to you,
What?
is everyone gives a different version of that answer, a different version of the same answer. And what I mean by that is, and that's why I love asking that question, because it's kind of one of those ones, it's like hard to describe, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Like if somebody, I always use the example. There was a great person. I was going to say great guy. There was a great person on this podcast, Steve Weigel, who's the chief operating officer of Goodberry's Creamery in North Carolina. And he's ex-Darden and a bunch of other different businesses. Great guy. And we were chatting, and he used the example where he met Bill Darden in the bathroom randomly. And he was kind of coming out of the bathroom, and he was like, "Oh, you work here?" And it's like, "Yeah, I work here. I'm new here." And it's like, he's talking about his career. And he says, Pat, like, he pulls out a tissue from the dispenser in the bathroom, and he wets the tissue and he cleans the mirror in the restaurant. And he goes, "See how easy that was?" And he was like, light bulb moment for him, in terms of like, the little things
The
are the
little things.
things that separate good from great.
Mhm.
And people always say, like, "Oh, if you see an overflowing trash can in the restaurant, are you going to take that out? You know what I mean? Or there's a bit of trash in the corner of the
Yep.
hotel floor or something.
Are
It's
you going to
like,
stop and pick it up?
could you step and pick it up?" And those things are kind of not necessarily things you can train, and it's hard to identify for them. And this is why I laugh when I ask people to explain to me, because that's what you're trying to say, which is like, you're trying to find a pure, like, hard work, like, attention to detail, kind of gregarious people person who gets people and understands like the mission of that kind of business. All of those things are intangible. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, you can teach somebody POS. You can teach someone how to like make a table. You can teach somebody like the floor plan and like the guest plan and all these kinds of things. But can you teach them to, like, when somebody comes in, that type of service with a smile?
Yep.
Everyone uses the example of Chick-fil-A constantly. And I have to explain to my Irish family on the phone. I'm like, they don't understand. And I'm like, yeah, like, why is it so big? And I'm like, well, I think a lot of it is the perception that it just has amazing people working there.
Yep.
Like, they have trained their staff. So that gets to the nub of what I'm getting at as well, Jill, which is like, you can train this type of leadership. You can identify these kinds of amazing intangibles that you're looking for in people. And I'm always thinking in my head, if I was a restaurant, like, if somebody was listening to this podcast, I'm almost like, how do they take away, like, what would they, if they're hearing you, Jill, like, what are they going to take away from like identifying sort of talent? Like, when you think about like how restaurants, big chains, small chains, whatever the version of the restaurant is, like, how do we think about like, yeah, how do we identify that kind of talent? And especially like, say, actually, better question on top of that, more layered, given that this is my Women in Leadership series,
Okay, here
which
we
is like
go.
more women in beyond into leadership positions within restaurants. How are we identifying, in particular, giving opportunity or access to women as well?
Okay. So like, you're saying, how do we find better women in the
Yeah.
industry?
So if we're saying that, like, there's a lot of intangibles that separate good from great, a lot of things that, like, how then, if that's in and of itself a sort of a quasi biased kind of way of looking at things, because your version of what makes a good person might not be the same version I look at as a good person. But
Right.
if it's like, we were chatting before about like, women in hospitality, being overarching majority in entry level positions, but
Mhm.
nowhere near
At the top.
level in leadership positions. Like, how do we think about identifying that sort of leadership or that type of person, when they're in the restaurant? If they're the majority, why are they not becoming the majority?
Why are they not at the top?
Yeah, exactly. Do we have a personal bias, when we think like through the
I
way
know.
women act, the way they behave, the way they communicate, quieter, more gentle, kind of different styles of communication? Men in leadership look for kind of male signals that are like, go get them and all this kind of stuff. Like, how do you think about that?
Yes,
Putting you on the
I
spot
agree
here.
with you. But if you sit there and you think, you look at the, you look, if the tops are all men, then somehow that has to change because they're looking for their same style, and so that it's a different one to it's a hard one to crack because we've got to get up over that next echelon.
Totally. And I mean, like, it kind of maybe it just reminded me what we were saying just offline there, where it was like just phrases like shooting from the hip. It's like you don't
That's
think about that, but it's
right. Yeah.
like obviously like it's a very male centric kind of phrase, harmless in and of itself, but also like I think just an element of the kind of structural kind of system that exists within sort of not just hospitality. I mean, like not just corporate America, I think. So I don't think this
It's
is a
everywhere.
uniquely
Right.
American problem as well. It's like, but like affecting change, means affecting effort, and
Yep.
it's like,
Yep.
a consciousness and intentionality towards kind of leadership. And I think it's interesting, with like core, for example, you know, the acronym itself, Children of Restaurant Employees, the majority. I mean, where would you say, like, and you're dealing with, I mean, children, I mean, it would imply that there's a mom involved in the
Yeah. Yeah.
restaurant. And that's in another type of like kind of position that women find themselves in that men don't find themselves in, which, is being like, the mother to a son or the mother to a
Well,
daughter or
sure.
whichever,
And
and home care and the sort of maternal sort of setup that like
mhm.
men can do their 9 to 5 and kind of go, whereas
Yeah,
women have to.
and core, if it wasn't for the Maui fires last fall, core 73% of core grants go to single moms.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Mhm.
That's actually unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. Because the Maui fires came in, it skewed the numbers, and it's like 62% for now, but it'll skew back up.
But
So that's
73% say, okay, let's take that number.
mhm.
Like, that's extraordinary that it goes to like single parent families. You know what I mean? Like mothers. Like, what does that say of not just the industry in Maui, but the industry like in the country? Because presumably, with something similar like that, if, you know, God forbid, was like a hurricane in the Gulf or there was something else, like something
Yeah.
similar, you would imagine there'd probably be a similar kind of figure in those kinds of places as well. So, what does that say about like, you know, I guess what I'm thinking is like that seems like an extraordinary number.
I
Like
know.
73 is so high.
That goes to what you were saying before, is women are all in the lower positions and not in the higher position. Well, look, it totally makes sense because there's the ones we're giving the grants to as well.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that in and of itself is a data point. I'm actually I have to say I'm kind of stunned by it. Like, genuinely,
I
I'm like,
know.
wrapping my head around it because
Yeah.
if ever there's a data point to indicate not only like you're just saying it's not only like, they're getting grants as well. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So like that also is an indicator that they're like in positions of like less income from like sort of the business in the first place because they need it. It's like emergency funding.
Yep.
And so when we think about it, it's like if ever there's a data point to show like the position of women in like sort of the industry in and of itself, it's like that is a leading indicator to
Mhm.
like where we are. And like for me, I don't want to feel like I'm sort of like some sort of like patriot over here. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, yeah, we'll solve it. But I'm always curious, like because the people can have anecdotes and people can have stories to tell themselves about like situations and everything else, but the data doesn't lie,
Right.
and that for me is like quite a number. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, if that, how would we react to that if we were like, okay, there's clearly a structural issue here within the industry as well, that
Yep.
like 73% of the recipients of this type of grant were single mothers in Maui. Now we know it's Maui and we don't have data obviously for like were this a nationwide catastrophe or
Yeah.
something, God forbid. But we would imagine it would parlay itself something similar. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So if that's the case, like, how do we like bring that number down? Like, you know what I
No,
mean? What can we do, Jill? What can we do?
I know. No, I know. And it's a great question. And it's a toughie. It really is.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and again, I always like to stress that like it's not necessarily just a hospitality problem. I refer to hospitality because people listen to this from all elements
Yeah.
of of hospitality, hotels, casinos, taverns,
Yeah.
pubs, restaurants, clubs, whatever, you name it, resorts. I've had them all. But it's not necessarily like a hospitality problem. Like it's obviously, an American,
Hmm.
working kind of situation as well. But like in my head, I'm like, okay, what, like, when you say, like, say the mission of core, okay,
Hmm.
and it's like, what, like, can we do to improve the station of women today within restaurants? In the sense, like, is core providing programs to like help them like train to be better leaders, better managers, helping them with like, yeah, you've got kids, we can help with like daycare or something so you can spend more time at work, that kind of thing.
You know, we have uh alternatives, like if they need help with financial, just financial budgeting, like to learn to be able to, we have different areas that we can put them with.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes, I think the biggest thing is the daycare. That is the
Yeah.
big struggle. And I was at the bar and restaurant conference, and I was talking to a gentleman, and he said, "Oh my gosh, the big one of the biggest problems with a majority of our employees is the daycare."
Yeah.
And obviously that is the problem, and that's who we're giving it to, the single moms. So there's got to be something. We don't we're a little we do not have that program right now. But he had said, "Is there anything we could do to try to have core be an arm of that as well?"
Yeah.
I think that's really smart. It's not happening right now, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen in the future. But we need more of that. And
Totally.
I think if there was daycare, trustworthy, good daycare that we could help these employees with, um, that would be a life changer for
Totally,
this
because
industry.
it's an unlock for like greater opportunity.
Yep.
Like, being present in the workplace is obviously a huge
Hmm.
thing. Being there when that leader is like, I need X, and you're like, I'm there,
Yeah.
matters, and it's like, and again, I mean, I don't have the data to hand, but obviously this is not just a hospitality issue as well. Like, I mean, mothers in all walks of life, it is a huge career move, so to speak, to even have a child. Like you're putting yourself in a position where it's like, okay, you're going to exit the workforce for an amount of time. What does that do to people's career? And obviously
Hmm.
there's tons of data that show that like men and women with graduate degrees in the workplace, when women like drop out of the workplace to have a child, that
Hmm.
their future income is impacted by the time they are outside of the workplace. Opportunities don't arise as much. And
Yep.
so it's not necessarily just a restaurant thing as well. So it's like, obviously, it's something that I'm
No,
obviously very keen to stress. But I do think it's fascinating because, like, that's why I love the mission of core. And that's why I was like, I really wanted you to come on the podcast and like talk about this, because it's like, I don't think like, that's unfair of me to say. I was going to say, I don't think enough airtime is given to this. I mean, obviously there is, but I mean,
right, right,
like,
right, right.
in the sense that, like, it's one of those kind of like rocks you turn over and you look at and you go, oh my God, you know what I mean? But like that data point is 73%. Now, I know you said it'll go down to 62, but it's like it'll
Yeah,
normalize itself. But
yeah.
like that for me is a stunning data point to
Hmm.
suggest that, like, more work is needed within the restaurant industry to like figure out how do we like really support and give opportunity and access, rather than give opportunity, like give access to opportunity for
Yeah.
people to kind of graduate up the ranks. Like, I think like, I hear like many of like the restaurant groups I've spoken to, talk about their leadership programs with me now. And
Oh,
they
I
talk
love
about
that.
like identifying talent in the organization, but as a retention policy, as much as some sort of like honorable sort of like, like quasi halo that lives above them. It's like, yeah, like,
Yeah.
I mean, the wonders of capitalism. It's like, but it's fair to say, like, I mean, I'm hearing from like, I mean, look, everyone who comes on my podcast is like successful. They are
Mhm.
successful people in the hospitality business. And so when they're coming on, they're telling me about like their programs, their benefits. I've had people tell me that they have like 401ks from the get-go now.
Oh,
I had the founder of
that's
Tupelo
great.
Honey in North Carolina, and you know what he told me, which makes me laugh, but he was like, we were kind of joking about this. He was like, the most, like the buzziest benefit that they created in their restaurant was pet insurance.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, they're going mad for pet insurance.
Oh
but
my,
but offering that because obviously people during COVID, like, I mean,
we all got dogs because they were
I
home
got two.
alone.
So
Oh
it's
my,
like,
oh, you got two?
yeah,
Did you say you got
yeah.
two dogs during COVID?
Well, in the last year. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, that explains the bags in my eyes,
See, so yeah, so did you get the pet insurance? You
Well,
have?
I don't know if I don't know if my company offers it. but
Oh
I,
man,
but like, I definitely need it because they go to the vet a lot.
I know.
But
I had three dogs at once, and it's a lot.
it's a lot. One's a black lab and one's an Italian greyhound. Both rescues, so that makes
Cool,
me a better
cool.
person.
Yes,
I'm
you
like,
are.
I'm a really good
I think
person.
differently of you now, so I'm
Thank
glad.
you. I appreciate that. I'm just a hero. But like the types of benefits, that like they were offering these benefits before COVID, and I think that's amazing. And then
Mm-hmm.
COVID happens and people exit. I had one person on the podcast call it we're in the great resignation to the great regret now, meaning that so many people left, but now so many people want to come back.
Come back, and
That
then you left.
Yeah, so many people left. They did their DoorDash, they did their Uber Eats, they did their
Mm-hmm.
Amazon warehouse, factory fulfillment centers, that kind of stuff. Went into alternative careers, opening, closing. It's not a way to
Yep.
raise a family, being on furlough for so long, not a great way to live. It's not motivating, it's not inspiring.
Nope.
And what we've seen is because so many people left, there's a dearth of up and coming GMs across the board now. Like if you talk to any of these sort of restaurant leaders, hotel leaders, they'll all talk about like GM. It's so hard to find GMs now. And
Oh
so
wow.
because basically, if you imagine it like a graduation class, like nobody graduated. Like
Right.
there's no class of 2020 and
Maybe
2021.
this is the hole we need for the women to be able to spiral up in that position.
Well, exactly. So this is what I was getting at. So
Oh,
like
I'm sorry.
what no. This is what I was gonna say. And I appreciate you
Yeah.
saying that because like the hole that's been filled is like leadership identification and
Yeah.
making it clear that these businesses offer careers now, and I think we're
Yes.
hearing more of that. So like, be it like it's like any large sort of chain organization. I say chains because that's not even the right way of using. That's not what even
Oh, I
people say
know
in
what you
America
mean.
anymore.
I
But
know
you
what
know
you
what I
mean.
mean in the sense that like
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're FSR, doesn't matter if you're QSR, doesn't matter if you're fine dining, doesn't matter if you're hotels. The new remit is identifying the great people, the diamonds in the rough in your organization, and getting them in a fast track to like
Mhm.
leadership positions. And I think there's
Yeah.
more formal programs coming, but it's not just for like your 50 location restaurant. Like I had somebody on recently and they're like 18 locations, kind of coming at the back end of COVID. It was very difficult for them, like shut down all their stores. And they're now implementing their own leadership program and like
That's
training
great.
program for their staff. Cause like I think people need to realize like how expensive it is to find people, like
Mhm.
how expensive it is to like replace churn, like, you want to create and foster a great place to work. I mean, it's so easy.
Yeah, I know. Well, you were talking earlier about how do you get people to know that there's new opportunities and you can work your way up within the restaurant industry. And what you're saying there is if people start doing it, the word's going to start getting out more and more because someone's going to say, "Oh my gosh, I just took a job at Tupelo Honey, and did you know they offer this? I have benefits I could choose for this."
Totally.
I think if the more I know it's hard on restaurants, but if that having that leadership, spiral up and being able to offer the pet insurance or insurance or something where they can feel protected. I know
Yeah.
that CORE is here. There's other places that are also there for time in a crisis, but I've also heard that some larger chains are having their own internal medical crisis that you can apply
Yeah.
for as well. So all of that together, using all those avenues could really, help someone and make them feel more secure in that industry.
Totally. And I think you're using the right words there, like safe, secure,
Yeah,
like, it's a very cutthroat sort of marketplace for talent we live in, like this is America, at will
yeah,
employment, essentially where,
yes.
and then hourly workers again, even more like, I mean, the data across the board is like, people lasting in jobs like 6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Like there's just enormous turnover, and why it's
terrible.
likely work conditions, it's pay. But like, if you think about somewhere like California, where now you have your minimum wage, say $20,
Can you imagine
and
that? Minimum wage is $20. That's, I mean, it's
back in
good.
my
It's
day,
good. It's good. But on the other hand, wow, it used to be, 12, 50, $12, and now it's up to 20.
yeah, and I mean, like, but what that does is it equalizes like sort of like the pay opportunity across the board.
Yep.
And that
Hmm.
makes other places have to like work harder at their benefits. Why should
Hmm.
I work for you?
Yeah, I can go over
And
here and work for this. Hmm.
like it is a very touchy subject, and I don't formally take a stand in it in the sense that like I'm just a casual observer who
Yeah, me
supplies
too.
I supply employees through a software. You know what I mean? Like,
I help
but
employees, so we're good. We're
do you know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think like, we're just in that phase of the pendulum where
Yep.
we're coming out the back end of COVID, where before the ball was very much in the employer's court. And now, because it's such a competitive marketplace for talent, we're now on the other side of that sort of space, which is very
Mhm.
much like, employees can be a bit more demanding. They can ask for more benefits. There's more opportunity for them to move elsewhere if they want to. They
Yep.
don't just have, I think people don't realize they don't just have to be in hospitality anymore, that they can go do other jobs. Like
Yep.
people are looking for good people. Your background, high school degree, diploma, university, college degree, if you're good, you'll get in anywhere. You know what I mean? And I think like folks in restaurants, folks in hospitality have kind of realized that. And I think for the better. I mean, what it does to like the business and sort of margins, and we could talk about inflation and everything else, and how
Oh,
it's really
yeah,
hard
that's a
for
whole
like
other topic.
restaurants to like make money, and that's very fair to say. But I think at the same time, I mean, when we talk about like sort of like, children of restaurant employees, where we are in 2024 today versus where we were in say 2019, 2020, 2019, 2018 is
Mhm.
like night and day in terms of the opportunity that people can potentially have. Now, that's not to say that people weren't before 2020, like putting opportunities in place. Like that's clearly not the case. That's not what I'm trying to imply. It's
Right.
more like now there's like very much like an external marketplace pressure on the retention and the acquisition of good candidates, that these programs need to exist as a way to entice and retain
Yep.
employees.
And you had mentioned earlier that a lot of times some people are quitting after 6 to 8 weeks. Yes, there's going to be some unusual circumstances why someone might leave, but you'd have to look at that and say that's got to be training or the atmosphere, the culture where
Yeah.
they didn't like it. They didn't something was wrong and that's why they left.
Totally. And I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, culture eats process for breakfast. Isn't that what they say? Like, I mean, I got so many culture puns, hard to describe, but when you see it, I think I've said that line in like every episode of this podcast. I think I am a pun merchant. But I think, like, I had a great, great person on the podcast recently. You'll love this. Lisa Lombardo is her name, and she's like a SVP at a company called Arc Holdings, Arc Hospitality, and they're
Uh-huh.
pre-development hotel builders, but they also own 20-ish hotels or something. And she was telling me in her organization that the leaders' bonus comp is pegged against cultural metrics as well as business metrics. So, for example, they have a letter that everybody in the team has to sign for, like, say, people's birthdays. And they have to send, I think, 8 or 9 of them at least a year for them to hit that metric. But that's, you have to go and get every single person to sign that card to say like happy birthday
Wow.
or congratulations or whichever.
To make
And
sure the
to make
culture.
sure,
Yeah.
exactly. And she was saying to me, which I thought was very fascinating, and it's really resonated. That episode has really resonated with me because I'm like, it was one of the first times I saw like the material view and the material impact of great culture, in the sense that she said to me, like, look, there's, you got your causality and your correlation. And obviously, like, there isn't a cause and effect here, like the impact that you can't really measure, like because of these letters, we hit our number. But she was like to me, the business units that hit those cultural metrics have more revenue, like on a prorated basis, than other units that are not hitting those cultural targets. So
Really?
for her as a leader, she looks at that initiative as having a direct, tangible impact, not only on business in terms of bottom line revenue, but also hitting internal cultural norms and making people stand by them. And I think about that a lot for hospitality because it's like it can be done.
Wow. That is really neat.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, what's not to like?
I
You're
know.
like,
What's
oh, I
not
hate
to
that.
like
It's a
about
terrible
it, right?
idea.
But that's like one of the first ones I've heard that it's measured. It's
Yeah.
measured.
Well, that's the thing. And I think, because if you think about like restaurants, okay, the two biggest costs on your bottom line are what? Food, people.
People, yep.
And people are referred to as a cost, not an asset. And I think that's like the mindset shift that I think we're kind of starting to go through now, where it's like, whoa, we actually need to like look after these and keep
Yep.
them and encourage them and make them see their full potential,
Yes.
i.e., no longer a cost and now an
Yes.
asset. And I
Right.
think that's kind of where we're moving towards, I should hope. I mean, that seems to be the vibe anyway. That's the vibe I'm getting.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, people don't want to show up and be hired to do a job and be like a just an order taker or a monkey, you telling them what to do. They want to learn it. They want to feel embraced in their position and to be able to make decisions and grow. And so if you're not given that, so I mean, some people are fine that, but majority of the people they want to take control of their position and own it.
Totally. And that's the thing. I mean, like, what makes a great employee? Is it just being entrepreneurial? You're finding somebody who can, like we said, the intangibles, like roll up their sleeves, get it done, do it with a smile, be gregarious, these kinds of things. I'm very conscious of these things, and it's like, let's get more women out there. Like, I mean, I gotta say, I've loved this chat. I
Yeah,
mean, we
me
could
too.
we could talk for hours about
I
this. I
think
feel
we
like
could. We're
we've
just
definitely
getting
hit it
started
off.
actually, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, everyone, there's more to come.
there's more.
But I guess, like the mission of core, say here today, April 2024. Wow, I almost forgot what year we were in. It's been a busy day. If we think about it, okay, like it's evolved massively from
Mhm.
what it was over the last 5 years since the pandemic. You had your Maui fire, which was an absolute travesty for that place and really devastating. But shows the key value of like what you're doing and like how you can really help people in the industry. I think, like as you look for into the future, like what do you think is like the future face of core?
I think, well, obviously, well, we're in our 20 years. I think core is going to just it's we're going to keep growing and more people will know about us to be able to utilize this us in the industry. But I
Yeah.
also believe that core is going to have like the babysitting arm. We're going to be able to get more arms out there to make it a whole person to
Yeah.
help the whole person.
That's awesome. I mean, and I'm absolutely excited for that. And I'm excited to kind of hype you guys and kind of really kind of help like do my bit to help promote that as well, like
Oh,
here on the
thank you.
pod and giving you the platform to talk about it. And I appreciate you coming on and being so articulate and, really kind of just having a great chat with me here
Yeah,
about a lot of
had a
different
great
challenges. There's so many challenges this industry kind of
time. Mhm.
faces, and it's like to see like material impact that you have, like that's all honestly, when I talk to my own team and I'm like, I don't really care what you're up to, just come back to me with the material impact. Like, what did you actually do? And it's like amazing to hear the material impact of core and know that it's there. And I'm delighted to be able to like have you on the show here, Jill. Talk about it, talk about challenges in the industry, and we'll be hyping the hell out of it.
Oh, thank you.
When the episode is ready.
And I'm just, what a pleasure. And we're so thankful to be here today and to be able to talk to you. Have had a great time.
Oh, you're a star. Thank you so much.
Thank you.